Prepare to set fire to the index card of allowable opinion. Your daily dose of liberty education starts here. The Tom Woods Show.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of The Tom Woods Show, episode 2424, with our old friend James Delingpole. Now, James, first of all, James is the host of The Delling Pod. That's his podcast, The Delling Pod. He's got the greatest opening music of any podcast in world history. I never skip over it. I have to hear it every time. And then all day long, I'm humming it to myself. I got to know James because years and years ago, I read his writing. He's over in the UK, and I would read his articles here, there, and everywhere. And I remember thinking, this James Delingpole is one interesting guy. And then I thought, but I could never get a James Delingpole on my humble little show. And now, here, as a matter of fact, here we are. So, James, welcome back.
As ever, you flatter me, Tom. And it was lovely. It was lovely to meet you, can I say, when you came over to England. It was a meeting of minds. So thank you for having me back.
It was so wonderful that when we had lunch, you very deliberately went out of your way to get me out of the center of London and into places where real people actually live. And so we went to a restaurant where real Englishmen eat. You know, it wasn't just a touristy place.
No, and real Italians, I seem to recall. It was a place, wasn't it called, my Italian is not very good, but I think it's pronounced Bricciole. And it's,
yes, that's right. That's where we ate. And
really
it was real
Italian.
Italians. The only people I now trust to cook Italian food, really, they have to be Italians. It doesn't, for some reason, it just doesn't work otherwise. So anyway,
that's not urine I'm drinking. I'm not that alternative. It is actually what's it called? The stuff you take when you've been nuked. Iodine.
Good heavens! See, these are the perils of having video now. And no one would even have known what you were drinking.
But I didn't want them to think, look, it does look a bit like urine.
But I think we would have thought apple juice first, James.
Oh, sorry. It's my mind, Tom.
That's quite right.
Sorry.
Well, listen, so I want you to know, so I have this habit now. I have a personal trainer. I go to every weekday that I'm home. I travel a lot, but when I am home, every weekday I go to the gym and I have this personal trainer. It's a woman, by the way. I'm very egalitarian in things like this. And all morning, the entire session, I said to her, I have no idea what James Delingpole is going to talk about on my podcast. You know, I got to be ready for anything. So I do want to tell people that as time has gone on, as we've talked about in previous episodes, your way of looking at the world has, I wouldn't say it's done a 180, but maybe it's become a bit more intense. And so
totally.
As when I was in London, I had lunch with our mutual friend, Dominic Frisby. And we both agreed that we love James Delingpole, but we're not entirely sure we can follow him on everything. But on the other hand, we do not rule out that he may be right about everything.
It's true. I have been on what is known as the heroic journey in the last 2 or 3 years. And my position on so many things has changed. And I think, do you know what? I think you very kindly said that you used to read my old stuff. And I don't think my writing style has changed. I think I still write very readable prose, but my subject matter may have got a bit more esoteric, shall we say? And I'm sure that there are people from my past who, when they have conversations about me, if they ever do, they say things like, whatever happened to James? He was so good, but now he's gone completely mad. He's gone down the rabbit hole. He's just crazy. Whereas other people, maybe discovering me for the first time, is saying, wow, this guy is based. He is out there. He totally gets it. He can be my new, I don't want to be anybody's guru. I'm just, do you know what I am, Tom? I'm a seeker after truth. And sometimes the truth takes you in crazy directions and it gets you mocked and it gets you marginalized. But I don't care. I'm only interested in the truth.
Well, a lot of what you're talking about and what I'm talking about boils down to the question of whether the people who rule over us, and by that I don't necessarily mean exclusively the political class. I also mean the intellectual classes who try to rule over our minds, the people in the universities. Is it just an accident that one academic discipline after another is completely laughable and corrupt? As we've seen, I keep talking about the replication crisis, and we talked about this at our lunch, but that went way beyond psychology. That was one discipline after another, turned out to have one bogus, phony paper after another. There are certain areas of chemistry where you might be able to trust what's going on, but it's just a complete you-know-what show going on in academia.
It is.
So we have those people, we have the political classes. The issue is, are these people just bumbling fools who mean well, and they're trying their best to make our lives better, but they just keep misfiring? Or are they actually sinister people? And I went through they're just bumbling fools, and if only I could get them to read this textbook on economics, that would change things around. But if they were bumbling fools, wouldn't they bumble into the right thing once in a while just by accident? And yet every single elite obsession is anti-human without exception and based on propaganda. So yeah, I can't prove that they all had a meeting where they said they were going to coordinate this, but what I can prove is everything they're obsessed with runs counter to the flourishing of mankind. So that's as far as I've gone.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to pick you up on one particular point you made, they want you to believe that they're bumbling fools. That is part of the trick, because if they can persuade people who might otherwise take action against them, that, with a few more well-written editorial pieces and a few more incisive podcasts, we can show them the light. We can change their minds. We can make them better people and effect better policies. That's part of the illusion, and it's a dangerous illusion, because what it does is it gives us the false sense that we have agency in this, that they care about what we think, that we can turn things around, and maybe if we vote for the right politicians, we'll finally get the policies we want. But you may have noticed, this was one of my moments of awakening, I guess. I spent most of my journalistic career, the first 30 years as a journalist, I'd say, writing trenchant articles. I considered myself a kind of South Park conservative. I believed in limited government. I was believed in personal responsibility and stuff like that. These were easy arguments to make because, it makes sense, doesn't it? But I began to realize that, in the UK, we've got the Conservative Party supposedly representing this thing we've been encouraged to think of as the right, and they are the enemy of the left, supposedly. More recently, I've just come to realize that it doesn't really matter who you vote for, left or right. You're basically voting for the Uniparty. So that's my kind of normal, sort of what I would call the sort of traditional take on the world, which I think everyone can relate to. The step I've reached now is that essentially Ephesians 6 is right, that for we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. I've come around to understanding that Paul is right when he says in 2 Corinthians, I think, sorry, I don't mean to get all biblical on you, but I think this is important. When he says in 2 Corinthians that the devil is the god of this world, it's not just some kind of entertaining trope he's adopted to get people more religious. It's actually a literal representation of what is happening in the world. You look at the political class through the ages; they are just puppets of higher powers. Who do these mysterious, often nameless people? But we know some of their names. There's families that are enormously rich and powerful. The families in the US, for example, some of them which founded the Federal Reserve in 1913. They're definitely part of the problem. They are definitely string pullers. They're definitely more powerful than any elected politicians. But then you ask yourself, who are these people serving? And ultimately, I think they are serving the devil. That's why the policies that they adopt are so anti-human. Because, of course, the devil doesn't like humans because we are created in God's image. So what better way of getting back at God than to make our lives miserable, turn us into slaves, exploit us, kill us? That's how it is.
Well, what you're saying brings to mind something that a conversation I had with a U.S. historian who died maybe 10 years ago, Ralph Raico. He was a libertarian, and he was an agnostic. And he told me that a few times C.S. Lewis almost converted him, but he never quite got there. And he said, I have been tempted to become a Christian just out of spite against the bad forces of the world. He said, but I didn't think that was a good enough reason. But so even somebody who was an agnostic, his view was he felt like the organized nature of evil, well, like they're not even trying to hide it. I mean, we're just surrounded by an anti-human force everywhere we look. His view was that almost requires a supernatural explanation. And so even as somebody who couldn't bring himself to accept the Christian faith, he absolutely did believe, nevertheless, that the world is obviously the battleground of some of some very, very significant fight that is not just a matter of, these people want to privatize the municipal trash collection and these don't. That there's something much more fundamental here that goes to the heart of what it means to be a human being.
Totally. I like to say to non-Christian people, look, you may not believe in the devil, but the people who run the world most certainly do. And not only do they believe in the devil, but they seek ways of pleasing him, both by their malign behavior, but also through the most unspeakable rituals, often involving children. I mean, really, really bad things. It's something that is not very often talked about because people maybe are frightened to talk about this stuff. And also, I think a lot of people feel uncomfortable hearing that it goes on. They'd rather not know. But we know. I mean, it is objectively true and verifiable that child trafficking, for example, is one of the world's, it's up there with drugs as one of the world's biggest industries. We know that this thing called satanic ritual abuse takes place because occasionally you get whistleblowers. I mean, often it gets covered up by the police. So the people who run the world really do participate in terrible things. Again, partly as a means of attaining worldly power. I mean, you're familiar with Dr. Faustus, aren't you?
Of course.
I don't know whether you studied that at school, but I mean, Dr. Faustus. It's the Faust legend, isn't it? Goethe wrote about it. Christopher Marlowe wrote a play about it. And it's about a guy who sells his soul for the devil because he wants worldly success. And during his life, he gets all these, he gets to do all this crazy stuff that you can do when you sell the soul to the devil. And then at the end of his life, he is dragged off, kicking and screaming, to hell. Now, I mean, I don't know whether that's what's going to happen to these people. I presume it is. But what I do know is that there is a connection between this, the stuff that we've been encouraged to think of as myth. I mean, I used to be a music critic, and one of the enduring legends of music is Robert Johnson, the great blues man. You know that story about how he got his great guitar picking skills. So he turned up at the crossroads one night. I mean, it's that's why Jimi Hendrix, I think, talks about does it? No, anyway, there is this kind of motif recurring in music about meeting the devil at the crossroads, and the devil hands you a guitar, and you suddenly acquire the gift of being able to play brilliantly. Led Zeppelin. Why did Jimmy Page indulge in all this kind of dark magic, occult stuff? It's because there is a strong connection between the music industry, the entertainment industry, and all this satanic ritual and symbolism. You see it in pop videos, all this sort of flirtation, especially now. I mean, the stuff that kids are watching today is appalling. the stuff involving demons and sort of celebrating this kind of demonic iconography, all the symbolism they engage in, like you'll see people covering up one eye, or you'll see Madonna and people doing this. These are all Masonic stroke Illuminati stroke occult symbolisms, which indicate that they have made a pact, and the pact is they get worldly success in return for selling their souls, literally.
Well, even if you're somebody who just thinks of the devil as a metaphor, as indeed, no doubt, a lot of bad people do.
Yeah.
What I think drives at least a good many of them is simply a desire to destroy, a hatred for bourgeois normality, a real hatred of it. And where it comes from in the case of each individual can vary. Could be because of their upbringing, could be whatever, a lot of factors. But it's a desire to destroy, and it calls to mind, for me, some of the early, I'm sure you know, some of the poems that Karl Marx wrote when he was younger. And these poems are direct appeals to the devil. We laugh at that because we're sophisticated modern people. We laugh at that. But it's very revealing that what he hates about God is that God can create in a fundamental way because he creates out of nothing. And Marx says, I can create nothing. And he seeks to destroy. And it seems to me that whether, regardless of what their relationship is to a devil or whether they think that way or not, what they're possessed of is nevertheless a devilish hatred of, frankly, things that are good and decent and normal that they want to overturn. They want chaos. They want disorder. And by interesting coincidence, it so happens the state thrives on chaos and disorder because then it will impose its own order. So, of course, it wants families pitted against each other over gender theory because it's got them right where they want them now. Because now they can be propagandizing the kids apart from the parents about their gender identity or whatever. I mean, these ideologies, just by coincidence, they all happen to serve state interests?
Yeah. And just as a digression, am I not right in thinking we had one of the guys, Matthew Perry, from Friends, died recently, didn't he? Am I not right in thinking that between in the interval, because I think they recorded it with a live audience, didn't they, Friends? Or between takes, I forget the exact story, but didn't they go off stage and say "Hail Satan"?
I don't know. I mean, maybe I've never heard that.
People can Google that story, but yeah, I think that's right. You mentioned C.S. Lewis earlier, and I quite like his writings on Christianity. I mean, he's one of the great Christian apologists. By the way, he went to my old school. He hated it. He absolutely hated it. And here's a weird fact. Both C.S. Lewis and Aleister Crowley went to my school. You know, Aleister Crowley, known as the wickedest man in the world, the Satanist, and C.S. Lewis, the great Christian apologist, went to my old school. I mean, not when I was there. I don't. I'm not sure that they were contemporaries. That would have been amusing, wouldn't it?
Well, I mean, Voltaire was educated by the Jesuits, so anything can happen.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And also, wasn't George Orwell taught by Aldous Huxley at Eton? Anyway, these are the digressions. What I was going to say about C.S. Lewis was C.S. Lewis he did a series of lectures which were during the war, which were subsequently published in a book called, I think, Mere Christianity. And he was trying to sort of persuade people, look, there is an intellectual case for God and Christianity. It kind of makes sense. And he argues that we all have this inbuilt moral compass. Whether we act on it or not is a different thing, but we all know what truth is, and we value truth. We find it very difficult to lie, at least initially. And we all know what beauty is. And we're drawn to truth and beauty, and love, of course, because these are manifestations of the divine. And if you look at what's happening in the world, on every level, and I think this process accelerated during the 20th century, and it's hyper accelerated in the 21st century. And you see it affecting all sorts of things. For example, the way that classical music in the early 20th century stopped being about making beautiful melodious sounds and started being atonal and shrieky and horrible and discomforting. And you saw similar things happening in literature. You saw modernism happening. You saw James Joyce. People stopped writing great novels like War and Peace and Anna Karenina. Instead wrote this kind of edgy, jumbled up stuff that we were encouraged to think was the new thing and special. And then you look at what happened to art. You think about all the Renaissance masterpieces. You think of Bellini and so on, his paintings, and then you move forward to the kind of stuff they were doing in the early 20th century, and then in the 1950s, the CIA started funding all this kind of modern stuff by Jackson Pollock, and so suddenly squiggles and swirls and splodges were art. I mean,
by the way, anybody who thinks James made that up, this is openly acknowledged now. The idea was to make the Eastern Bloc feel like they'd fallen behind. They weren't quite avant-garde enough. Because look at all this wonderful modern art that we're doing.
Yeah.
Oh, they must have gotten a good laugh out of that one when people actually started pretending that this was all really cool and amazing. So I've made this same observation. I think other people have. That again, you look at music, you look at art, you look at literature. There's no center. Same with architecture. There's no idea that. I mean, and incidentally, even like during the Enlightenment is claiming that the universe is kind of like a machine, that human society can be ordered by reason. And the result of that, no, the Enlightenment has a lot of problems. I'm not endorsing or criticizing the Enlightenment here, but when you have that worldview, it's not a surprise that you have music that tends to be quite orderly, that follow the symphonies that follow sonata form, symmetry, all the things like that. But when that center has been knocked away, when Einstein is telling you that those things you thought were constants and those things that you thought made sense actually don't, and then you have philosophers who are reaching conclusions that, again, are making it seem like everything's meaningless. Well, how would you be surprised that the cultural manifestation of that would be chaos and ugliness?
Yeah, and most people go along with this stuff, even or maybe especially the kind of people who should know better. So, I mean, you and I know, and I'm sure your listeners are all aware of just how debased the academy has become, to the point where actually, if I could recommend to my children, over again, I would not want them to go to university at all. I think university poisons your mind. It doesn't expand it at all, and it doesn't teach you anything worth learning. And I think a lot of this rot goes back to, so you could think about the cultural Marxists who invaded America initially in the 1930s and then set up camp in Columbia and New York, but also on they spent a time on the West Coast as well. So they were trying to undermine the system from within to abolish or at least try to abolish the family, to lead people away from their natural instincts, from their common sense. So that went on, but you also had parallel movements like these French philosophers, the sort of the nihilism and the rejection of logic by people like Derrida and Foucault and Sartre and all these trendy French philosophers, that if you wanted to be a groovy person, if you were an intellectual, you had to think these guys were great, and you couldn't question them, could you? No, in order to show yourself as a kind of an intelligent young person moving with the times, you had to adopt wholesale these views which are really against all the established values that our civilization has evolved over the years and are sort of accepted as true. suddenly we've been encouraged to reject the notion that some things are better than others, for example, to reject the notion of quality, to reject the notion of tradition, to reject all sorts of things, which is very disruptive. Because what these guys want, and I think this is part of their devilish plan, they want chaos. Because out of chaos, I mean, in fact, it's one of the great Freemasonic phrases, isn't it? Ordo ab chaos. I'm not even sure that it doesn't appear on the US dollar bill, doesn't it? Maybe.
If it does, I haven't seen it.
On that, with the pyramid and the eye in the middle.
I haven't got my wallet.
Anyway, it doesn't matter. It means order out of chaos. And what they do is they create. It's another phrase for this is problem, reaction, solution. So they make things so bad that people think, I can't bear this any longer. I want change. Who can help me? Oh, yes, the government can help me. So then the government introduces the legislation that they always wanted to introduce, but they just were waiting to create the situation that made it possible.
Well, see, this is why I still, even after the debasement of the term, I still think of myself as a libertarian. Because the central thing that I'm trying to say as a libertarian is that there is a kind of natural order that emerges from normal people. And so the reason this is helpful is that when what I affectionately call the lizard people come along and want to impose their own version of order on us,
yeah.
I can argue that we don't need the external imposition of order, because there is a naturally, spontaneously occurring order that occurs in the marketplace, in ordinary society. Yes, of course, there are criminals. Yes, there are problems you have to deal with. But in general, I don't need the ideological imposition of some kind of superstructure on us, because I think there is a kind of naturally occurring order that occurs within families, villages, provinces, and all on and on down the road. And so I don't need Hillary Clinton or Joe Biden, or for that matter, John McCain or Tony Blair to provide order for me in the sense that I don't need them to tell me what my kids need to learn or anything like that, what I should eat or any of these things. These are things that civil society can handle on its own.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I think for most generations, certainly in the West, for the last almost 2 millennia, they've had this ready-made roadmap, the Bible. Christian culture was culture for most people up until really quite recently. And if you look at it doesn't really matter whether you believe in God or not. You can look at the Bible and look at the precepts that Christianity establishes as the kind of rule book, and you think this really makes sense. I mean, I've become a massive fan of the Book of Psalms. I've started learning Psalms, and there are these simple lines like, "Put thou thy trust in the Lord, and be doing good. Dwell in the land, and verily thou shalt be fed." Well, it's really quite simple. So put thou thy trust in the Lord. Just observe the 10 Commandments. You recognize that man is frail, and be doing good. So just do the right thing. Dwell in the land. So appreciate nature. Live with nature. Work with the landscape. Work with the animals that God has kindly provided for you to eat, because that's what they are meant for. I'm sorry. I mean, unless they're horses, in which case they're there for riding. Or dogs, we don't eat dogs. They're there to be companions. Cats are there to despise us while exploiting us. But you know what I mean. There's this. We up until very recently, we understood that there was a natural order of things. We did not consider them ourselves, as the environmentalists seem determined to do. We did not consider ourselves on about the same level as viruses and amoebae and whatever mollusks. It was quite clear that we were the top species, and although we had a kind of role as a sort of guardian of nature, we'd been given dominion over the animal kingdom, and we were encouraged to live in harmony with nature, form families, not cheat on our wives, just not kill people. That's quite a big one. Thou shalt not kill. We were encouraged to keep the Sabbath, which I suppose, America, you work too much, don't you? You Americans, do you still keep the Sabbath in America? Do you observe Sundays?
More or less, but you'll find that in more and more cases, various, even just cultural restrictions, if not legal ones, have in some cases started to go by the wayside as the Christian influence has waned. But you still say, I remember, but this has gone away. My father, when we lived in Massachusetts, he couldn't buy beer on Sunday. So if he wanted beer on Sunday, he had to drive to New Hampshire, which was where you'd go to whenever you want something because there's no sales tax up there anyway.
As a young man, I used to loathe this because when I was growing up, England was much, much more. We had Sunday trading laws. You basically couldn't get stuff, and it was a real pain. Like you say, if you wanted to get beer, you probably couldn't because the off licenses, which is what we call liquor stores, they were closed. I'm not sure what whether the pub opening times were curtailed, but I'm now sort of thinking maybe we humans needed to be told that at least one day of the week ought to be sacred. To stop people exploiting us. I mean, the people, employers try, because otherwise they'd make us work 7 days a week, so wouldn't they? I mean, if they got half the chance, well, they do now, don't they? But we need to be able to appeal to a higher power to say, hang on a second, actually, the deal is we don't work on the Sabbath, whatever. I know culturally different religions have different Sabbath days, but we need one day a week free. But also, I think, and I can't remember which of the classical authors made this point, but obviously he was pre-Christian. But if you don't honor the gods, you're in trouble. And I think that we do need to set aside one day in the week to sort of contemplate our maker or whatever, to think about stuff. And so a special day which is kept apart from relentless work and contemplation of earthly things.
Well, it's certainly good for me because for many years, because I'm like you, James, I have no formal employer and haven't had one for many years. So that has many, many advantages. But one disadvantage is there's no time clock. There's no punching out, as we say in the US. There is no 5:00 p.m. where it's all over. In principle, I could be up here in the office working all day and night. I have to make a deliberate effort to say to myself, no, I'm done with that for today. And now the other part of my life begins. Now I'm much better at that. Now, James, I have the other problem, which is I want to be on vacation all the time. So I've swung completely the other way, but I've become very, very efficient in what I do, so I am able to balance it. Now, I want to throw the conversation to the C word. And when you and I use the C word, it's not a bad word. It's the word conspiracy. Okay?
Right. I was wondering there, Tom. I was wondering where you were going. I was thinking, wow, this is an X-rated
my
show.
longtime listeners know I would never utter that C word. So there's no way. Right. But so I want to say a little something about this. I know that this is a scary word for a lot of people.
Yeah.
But the way I think of it is, when I think that maybe there's a conspiracy, all I mean by it is that I know, and my listeners know, that there are bad people out there. There are many of them who are in charge of things, and I know that those bad people, they don't keep their badness as just an intellectual exercise confined to their brains. They want to spread badness. So I know that there are bad people in charge who have plans. And I also know that when they state the reason for their plans, this ostensible reason is often not the real reason. Now, that's all. When you state it that way, it doesn't seem particularly controversial.
No.
But at the same time, I do want to say, I've had the odd run-in with people who think of themselves as belonging to that camp. And one problem I find is that I think they are drawing conclusions that the evidence often won't bear. And I know that because I've been on the receiving end of it once. About 10 years ago, 11 years ago, there was and I know I'm picking out an absurd example, but it involved me, and I've never forgotten it.
Mhm.
There was an accusation on a bulletin board system somewhere that Ron Paul was part of a Jesuit conspiracy to control the world. And I thought, well, it's very odd that Ron Paul's an Episcopalian, or his family, right? So his brother's a Lutheran and all that. It just seems like a little bit odd, but okay. There have been unlikely bedfellows in the past. So what's the evidence for this claim? And first of all, by the way, anybody who knows anything about the present pathetic condition of the Jesuits, I only wish they had the ambition to run the world. At least they'd be interesting instead of just boring woke leftists, which is what they are now. But leave that aside. Here, they drew me into it because I was very close with Ron Paul. So they drew me into the conspiracy, and they said, well, look at Tom Woods here. He graduated from a Jesuit high school in Wisconsin in 1960. Now, James, I realize I'm not the springiest of spring chickens, but I do not look like somebody who graduated high school in 1960. All they had to do was look at one photo of me, for heaven's sake, and there are plenty of them on the internet. Secondly, I've never lived in Wisconsin. That's easily verifiable. I didn't go to a Jesuit high school. You can see me giving the commencement speech at my high school, North Andover High School in Massachusetts in 1990. So, and then there was, I spoke at what was at that time called Wheeling Jesuit University. So this was more evidence of my involvement in the conspiracy. But I spoke for their Institute for the Study of Capitalism and Morality, which was an institute that all the Jesuits there hated, that they accepted because a huge donor set it up, but they all hated it.
Yeah.
So this was the evidence. And so it soured me because I thought, if I'm going to be accused of this preposterous thing, and then when I go and look at the grounds on which they make the case, it's that flimsy, then these are not serious people. And so I just dismissed it all.
Yes, I think you shouldn't tar so-called conspiracy theorists with the brush of the craziest ones, and also don't forget that the people who are making these accusations could, I'm afraid to say, I'm going to sound really, really down the rabbit hole here, but they could be people who've been put there to discredit, to enable you to say what you just said. I get accused of being. I have been accused of being in the control of the intelligence services because, as evidence of this, they cite my background that I was at Oxford with a lot of with friends with two prime ministers. That my establishment background. How could I possibly be what I claim to be now?
Yeah.
Somebody actually went through all the articles I'd ever written and found this article I'd written on gardening and used this as, I mentioned Freemasonry, and they used this as evidence that I was hinting at my true allegiances, that I am actually a secret Freemason. By the way, I do know lots of members of my family are Freemasons, but they're kind of like lower tier. I don't think Freemasonry becomes a problem until the higher levels. But so what I'm saying is that inevitably, among people who you would describe as conspiracy theorists, there will be those who are just away with the fairies. But I would say that as a former non-conspiracy theorist, as somebody who spent most of his career, the first 30 years of my career, I spent looking at 9/11 truthers and moon landings and going, nah, not having any of that. These guys are tinfoil hatters. They're crazy. But that was almost a sort of self-censorship. I wouldn't go there. I didn't want to look at the evidence because I had been taught culturally, and our culture is very good at enforcing this, that the people who think these things are crazies, they do not deserve consideration. Their arguments are not worth looking at in any details. So I didn't go there. And what I found when a few years ago I started looking into these things, I thought maybe just one of these conspiracy theories might be true. Maybe it might have legs. The other, others are going to be nonsense, of course. But maybe one. So I found one that stood up, that the evidence just pretty much overwhelmingly, and I'm not stupid. I'm not a crime. I don't think anyone would choose to embrace a field of understanding, if you like, which means that they end up being marginalized, mocked, ridiculed, cut out of the mainstream, cut out of earning. In my case, for example, my views would now mean that I would not be published in all the newspapers I used to write for, all the TV programs I used to go on. So I've taken a financial hit. I've taken a career hit for this. I said at the beginning, I just care about the truth. And the conclusion I've come to is that a lot of things we are encouraged culturally for good reasons, because we're encouraged to do so by the people responsible for these conspiracies. The reason that we don't think about these conspiracy theories as serious things is because we've been encouraged by the culture to do so. But when you look into them, you find that actually they do stand up. And I would say that we should turn the phrase on its head. We shouldn't mock conspiracy theorists. We should mock coincidence theorists. All those people who think, yeah, it was just an extraordinary coincidence that on 9/11, all the remarkable air defenses that would normally have shot down these airliners that flew into, somehow they were just called off. That that they weren't doing their job. That we are asked to believe, and it's just an amazing coincidence that the collective intelligence of the CIA and the FBI was somehow just incapable of spotting any of these enormous clues. Or the coincidence. What about the amazing coincidence that in the dust of the Twin Towers, they found this intact passport, a passport belonging to one of these alleged jihadis who hijacked this plane. I mean, what are the chances, eh? What are the chances of a plane hitting a building and sort of being completely burned up, but somehow a passport just sort of flutters down and remains intact? And look, it belongs to one of the hijackers. What are the chances? So I think the coincidence theorists need to be have their thinking examined a bit more, and maybe we should take conspiracy theorists more seriously.
Well, I will say, I think I saw even on your Twitter feed, maybe you were just retweeting. I'm still not calling it X. It's going to be Twitter for me until I drop dead. But I think you had a thing about, I don't know what the crime that had been committed was, but they claim to have found an Iranian passport just neatly right by the crime scene. I mean, first of all, I mean, how dumb you would have to be to believe that is off the charts. But these people need to hold on to their passports better. I mean, of all possible places to lose it.
Do you know, Tom? I'm glad you mentioned that one, because apart from anything else, it's more topical and recent. And we know that the US deep state is really hot for war with Iran right now. I mean, that's the next plan. Yeah, and this was outlined. You can find videos of people in the State Department admitting this openly. That the US deep state, which is what really runs America, they wanted to invade Afghanistan, they wanted to do Iraq, they wanted to do it in Libya, and Iran, I think, is the only one on the list that they haven't done yet. So they're desperate to ramp up this tension. So you're going to get all sorts of these, I would call them false flags, where you are encouraged to believe that these terrorists are coming into America and committing these crimes, which must be avenged by the American aircraft carriers, and we bomb the hell out of the Iranians because of these incidents. And you're right. Imagine if you're a terrorist and you're planning some devilish deed in the US, and you're going to go on your mission. You're going to go and kill somebody or blow somebody up. I don't think you'd be thinking, okay, machine gun, check, bombs, check, passport, check. Why would you take your passport on a mission like that? I mean,
Yeah, it's just as soon as you think about it, you realize something is fishy about this. I mean, it's not an absolute metaphysical impossibility that he could have brought the passport. It's just enormously unlikely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so. And I think it speaks volumes for how the people who plan these operations, how little respect they have for us. I mean, how little respect would you have for the intelligence of the American people to go, how are we going to make them think that this was an Iranian planned terrorist mission? I know. We'll just have the newspapers report that they found an Iranian passport, and the American public is going to buy it. And the really sad thing is that maybe they're right in their low estimate of and I'm not just blaming Americans. I think it's the same in the UK. So many people really do take their opinions from what they read in the newspapers, what they're told to think, what they're told by the TV channels. The media, of which I was part for most of my working life, is essentially a lie machine on behalf of the elites, the people who really run the world. They don't have the interests of their readers and viewers at heart. They just want to control the narrative and shape the narrative for their paymasters, who are not our friends.
Well, here's the ultimate question for all this, because I suppose American entertainment goes all over the world, so I'm sure you are familiar with the terminology associated with the Matrix. You know about the different colored pills.
Yeah.
So in the Matrix, it's the red pill and the blue pill. But then since then, we've added the black pill, which is very, very, very pessimistic. And then occasionally there's a white pill. There's something that genuinely good that happens in the world. In fact, I remember Roger Waters, who's been outspoken against about the Israeli government, but also about the war in Ukraine. Waters, back in 1987, was very impressed with the Live Aid concert because I thought technology would be used only to oppress people. And now here there was that one night that we grabbed the technology and we did something good with it. And so he would consider that to be a white pill. So I want to know, which of these color pills is James Delingpole and why?
Yeah, do you know what, Tom? My understanding of the whole red, blue, white, black dynamic is slightly different. I'm totally with you on the red and blue pill. And you'll remember in the Matrix, and I think this is a very good. I mean, look, Hollywood works for the enemy. I'm sure the Wachowski brothers, or the Wachowski sisters, as they are now, they've had a sex change, or they identify as a different gender, whatever. That film was a classic case of what is known as predictive programming, which is that they show us their MO, their modus operandi, in order to, partly for manipulation purposes and partly for karmic purposes, because so what they do is they show you what they're doing, and if you don't respond and act on it, then you kind of deserve what's coming. Well, what the Matrix did, it said, we're all living in a kind of fake world, but most people can't see it, and most people don't want to see it. Most people would rather imagine they're eating a juicy steak, the blue pill version, than they would living in a crazy world controlled by these evil machine people who suck on our energy and stuff. So that's what gave us the phrase red pilled, for people who have a different understanding of the world. They know it's not as it's presented to us. Then comes the next phase where, you get black pilled. You realize that things are so bad. Things are that this has been going on since the dawn of time, that the bad guys have pretty much always been in charge. And who are we individuals to be able to fight this monstrous machine, or whatever you want to call it? And a lot of people get stuck in that stage, and they get very jaded and cynical, and they see no purpose in life other than bitterness and anger and just kind of indifference, because who cares? I mean, you can't do anything. Then you get what I would call the white pill stage, where you realize, hang on, I see white pilled as God has got this, that you basically get Christianity. That's For me, that is the final stage. So I have the consolation that even though probably I'm a target now for saying this stuff, there's lots of forces in the world that might be interested in bumping me off. I've lost loads of friends. I have trouble with my family. I've suffered a lot, but I'm not scared because ultimately I know that it's written that God wins this. That's the white pill. If you're asking me a separate question, which is, are there any white hats? Good guys who are going to a part of on Team Goody, I would say no. There are no white hats. I used to be a massive fan of Trump. I used to think that. I mean, I like him. I think he's a disruptor. He's an entertainer. He does some crazy stuff. But I don't think anybody gets to be US president without being part of their game, the enemy's game, the people who run the world. Trump clearly is less evil than Hillary Clinton, say, but that's not very difficult. Less evil than Obama, say, but again, that's not very difficult. But do I believe that Trump is not part of the overall evil plan? I don't think he's really working for us. Some of his stuff about Israel, for example, I get very upset by Israel because I like Israelis. I've got nothing against Jewish people, and it's really upsetting seeing what happened. Well, first of all, I was really upset by what happened during the thing they call COVID, this so-called pandemic. I found it really horrible the way that the Netanyahu regime forced the Israeli populace more brutally, I think, than almost any country on earth to take the vaccine. These experimental treatments, which I think cause a lot of people to be ill or to die. So I think there was something very. I like Israelis, but I think there's something very, very dodgy about the regime that controls them. In the same way, I like Israelis, but I also care for the Palestinian people. And I think it's awful what has been done to the Palestinians. And it seems to me that at the moment, we are being encouraged to take sides. So that if you care about the Palestinians, you are branded as pro-Hamas, pro-terrorist. And if you support the Israelis, then you are characterized as wanting to kill innocent people in Gaza. And actually, I think we're being tricked into creating the very tensions that the bad guys want. They want this to turn into a third world war involving Iran. I'm sorry about my flashing light, by the way. It's my battery's running out. I hope it doesn't give people epileptic fits. But we are being encouraged to take sides because how do these people, these bad guys, how do they control us? They use the same tried and tested techniques which have been used since at least Roman times. The Romans called it divide and rule. And that's what it is. That by dividing us and turning us against one another, it weakens us because there are far more of us than there are of these tiny, I call them the predator class that runs the world. They want us at each other tooth and nail because then they can control us. If we all get together and love one another, then suddenly they are powerless.
Well, I'll close with this. One thing I think we've all noticed is that as soon as this all happened on October 7th, there was now a division between a lot of people who had been kind of on the same page, learning about the nature of reality and the nature of the regimes who rule us. Some of those people think one way about this particular matter, and others of those people think another way. And so I felt like just as we were getting to, maybe not a critical mass, but rather an increasingly satisfying number of people seeing the world clearly, then now we're fighting against each other.
I'm so glad you made that. I was going to see whether I've got a battery here. Let's just see whether it works.
James is off the screen.
Look.
I see
No.
his shadow, though.
I put in a new battery, which is stopped
okay. I thought you
flashing.
were going to get something.
No. I was reaching out. Oh, hang on. Oh, there's another one. Wait. That my loss. I'm so glad you made that point, Tom, because have you noticed how in the last 2 or 3 years, and people who who still watch the news and read the newspapers are especially vulnerable to this. The powers that be, the rulers of the darkness of this world, our sinister controllers, they keep flashing these new disasters in front of us. So 1 minute you've got the pandemic, and everyone's divided between those who are going to take the vaccine and those who think it's an abomination. And then you get suddenly you come out of the pandemic, and what do you get instead? You get this war in Ukraine, and some people are told we've got to give all our spare military equipment and vote. Congress has got to vote for huge, billions of dollars of donations that I think domestically Americans could do with. Americans are struggling right now. Why are we giving our materiel and money to this kind of cokehead, Zelensky, an ex comedian who used to most famous for playing the piano with his penis on TV. This guy is suddenly a world statesman that we've got to support. Hang on a second, who made that rule? And then so that divides people. So the people who were talking sense about COVID, suddenly a massive, hot for war in Ukraine. And then suddenly you get this new thing. You get the Israel thing, and suddenly the divide between, you support Palestinians, you're a terrorist supporter. You support Israel, you're a genocidal whatever. It's they control us by dividing us, and every stage we lose more of our people. It's a shame.
Yeah, I agree. But what can you do other than just keep on trucking, right? I mean, what other thing can I do? I'm not one to throw in the towel. It's just not my personality. I just keep on going.
We don't throw in the towel. Tom, we've got God on our side. Come on, we're the good guys, And as long as it's really very simple. It really is. Just tell the truth. Seek out beauty.
But James, I can at least understand people who feel discouraged. I mean, in the U.S., we had completely unscientific rule during COVID, particularly at the hands of certain U.S. governors. Newsom in California, Murphy in New Jersey, Whitmer in Michigan. And guess what? They all got reelected. People said, yep, I want to be treated like cattle, and I want to reward you for treating me like that. That's demoralizing. I can understand why people would throw their hands up and say, what's the point in fighting?
Because people these days prefer the illusion of safety and security provided by bigger government than they do the responsibilities of freedom. We've been programmed that way. I mean, you and I think, and probably your audience, are the exceptions to this rule. You call yourself a libertarian. I mean, my instincts are still libertarian in that I don't believe in big government because it acts against the interests of the individual. That's a given. But people have been conditioned, brainwashed by Hollywood, by the news channels, by the publishing industry, by the music industry. People are controlled. People are incapable of independent thought. Sadly, that's our problem. I mean, I think even if there is a so-called Great Awakening, that Great Awakening is only going to extend to about 10% of the populace maximum. But that's the bad news. The good news is that revolutions, the things that change the world, and I'm not talking about bloody revolutions, because that's not going to work, because that just gives them an excuse to gun us all down. Social revolutions require less than 10% of the population to change everything. All it needs is enough of us to say, no, I am not tolerating this totalitarianism, because that's what it is. We are having our freedoms taken away. They are killing our families. They are killing our traditions. They are making our lives harder and harder. We've just got to say no. We've just got to stop taking these guys seriously, because they do not deserve to have the control over our lives that they have. They haven't got science on their side. They haven't got that. They're not doing anything which is good or positive. We just need to wake up and acknowledge that.
James, how do people follow you?
I'm currently, you can get me on most of the platforms. I'm currently quite big on. I'm enjoying Substack, because Substack's going to be easy to you find my channel there. I'm not very often on YouTube, but look out for the Delingpod, which is DELINGPOD. Do you put the details below?
I'll put it in the description on the show notes page. I'll link to your Substack.
I'd love some more American listeners, because I love America. I mean, I haven't been there recently, because I was forbidden from doing so because of the vaccine regulations and stuff. I didn't get jabbed, but I haven't been there for a while. But I've had some good times there, and I like you people.
Well, thank you. I was very sad that my 2 visits to London were in the fall of 2019 and then in February of 2020. And that meant that I had fallen in love with the place, and I know how you feel about London. Fair enough.
Yeah.
But I love it, at least as somebody who just visits and doesn't have to deal with the day-to-day. I got to enjoy theater and all these things before everything went crazy. Yeah. And then I remember wondering if I would ever be able to get back. Are they ever going to allow me back in? But they did, and I met James Delingpole when I did so. The feeling was mutual. It was great, Tom. By the way, can I apologize again for my flashing lights? This is just makes me look like it adds to the authenticity of the
disco.
All right, James.
Summer.
I'll direct people to your stuff on. This is episode 2424. So tomwoods.com/2424, or if you're watching on YouTube, you can. Or Rumble, you can look in the description and you'll find all these links. Thank you, James. We'll talk again soon.
You will on my show next time.
Yes, absolutely. I'd love to come back on the Delingpod. Thank you, James. Okay. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.
Become a smarter libertarian in just 30 minutes a day. Visit tomwoods.com to subscribe to the show for free, and we'll see you next time.
Like the sound of The Tom Woods Show? My audio production is provided by Podsworth Media. Check them out at podsworth.com.